Hello friends, Chris from doWhileLoops here, and in this video we're going to be talking about gigging. Doing some gigs. Whether you got some gigs on the calendar or you're thinking about maybe you want to get some gigs on the calendar, there's several things you're going to want to keep in mind. So let's hit it. Alright, rule number one, the cardinal rule of gigging, be on time. This rule is so important that most of the other things on this list can be boiled down to this first rule right here. Be on time. You got to remember that as soon as you accept a gig, you're a professional musician at that point, whether you think of yourself that way or not. And there's a person on the other end of that transaction that's expecting you to show up, have all your stuff ready to go, and just generally do what you said you were going to do. And that starts with being on time. Don't be the guy rolling in being like, hey bro, sorry, traffic was terrible. Just don't be that guy. That's bad look. Probably not going to get hired again. And overall, it's just going to be super stressful for all involved. So just don't do that. Just be on time. Also, subscribe to the channel. Okay, number two, know thy set list. It's generally recommended to build your set list well in advance of your gig, especially when you're first starting out. This way you got a plan, and it outlines exactly what you need to practice so you don't waste time. When it comes to building out a set list, the first thing you should know is how long do you need to play. From there, you can figure out what songs you're going to play to fill that time. I'd recommend performing each tune that you know and writing down the ballpark length of each one as you go. And while you're at it, write down the key and the general vibe of each piece of music. You can get a spreadsheet going with this info too, which might not seem very rock and roll, but is actually the best way to keep track of all this as your repertoire grows. Once you have that done, you can start building out your set. Think about what you like to open and close with and then fill in the gaps. And since you know the approximate length of each tune now, you can be sure you don't go under or over time. Make sure you factor in about 30 seconds in between each song for vamping with the audience, guitar tuning, etc., unless you're directly segueing into the next song. Pro tip here, by the way, you should avoid putting songs in the same key back to back if possible. This subconsciously puts your audience to sleep. Now, this whole process will also reveal if you have enough music to fill the time, which is a critical thing to know before you book the gig in the first place. You probably don't want to go booking a 3-hour bar gig if you only have Free Fallin' and Freebird under your belt. Now, if you're playing multiple sets, then just repeat that process and factor in breaks between your sets. It's generally accepted, at least in my experience, that you usually take a 10-minute set break every hour past the 1-hour mark. So for a 2-hour gig, you take 1 break, 3-hour gig would be 2, etc. And lastly, probably goes without saying, but you should write this set down and have it visible on stage, either on a piece of paper or a document on a tablet of some kind. It's all too easy to forget what tune comes next and all the excitement of playing live. The same can be said for lyrics as well. Those are all too easy to forget in the heat of the moment. The moral of the story is, though, you really only have to do all this admin once. Once you have it, then it's easy to mix and match and tailor your set to each gig as you go along. So, that's number two. Know thy set list. Alright, number three, sound equipment. One of the big things to figure out way before you get to your gig is the PA situation. Mainly, is this your responsibility? If they got a PA and a sound person there to set everything up and run it, then you're golden. You just show up, deliver the musical goods, get paid, and go home. It's gravy. If not, then that falls directly under your department as the musician. If you've never done this before, then think about all the instruments and vocals you have and what it's going to take to make those things louder. If you have a full band, you might need to think about mics for each singer, amps, and possibly mics for each instrument, etc. You're also going to need a mixer and some powered speakers of some kind. This is fairly involved and something you're going to have to put some time into before you show up to play. If you know the size of the room, then that can help too. For example, you might not need to mic louder instruments like drums, horns, or guitars if the room is small enough. Now, if you're a solo act and you have a limited number of instruments, say a vocal mic and a guitar, then you might look into a self-contained PA system. A good example of this is the Bose S1 Pro Plus, which is a battery-powered unit that can take 2 mic or instrument inputs and also has an onboard mixer. It's not a sponsored video. Bose doesn't even know that I exist, but this is just one example of a piece of gear that can accomplish this. There's plenty more like it on the market. Also, don't forget about ancillary gear, such as mic or instrument cables, tuners, stands, picks, etc. You might also want to think about bringing a backup instrument or at least a set of strings if you're a guitar player. On-stage string breaks can and do happen. And that's a definite buzzkill if you don't have a solution ready in fairly short order. Now, the fact of the matter is that the actual playing of the music during a gig is only a small percentage of what's actually involved in playing the gig. So, do some research, be prepared, you'll be fine. Alright, number 4, transportation and setup. So gigging is kind of like a construction job. Driving there, loading in, setting up all your stuff is all part of the experience. So first off, you should be aware of how long it's going to take just in drive time. That's probably going to play into your decision of whether or not to take the gig in the first place. And when it comes to the day of the gig, you should definitely factor in traffic. Will you be driving there in rush hour or some other busy time on the roadways? If so, you want to make sure you leave in plenty of time. There's also the parking situation to think about, which is greatly going to affect the load-in, load-out situation. Lugging all your equipment in and out of the venue is all part of the gigging experience, and how close or far you park is definitely going to make a big difference in the amount of effort it's going to take to accomplish all that. Now, if you never had the pleasure of loading in or out of a gig before, ask yourself these questions. How much equipment do I have? Obviously, the more you have, the more trips it's going to take. Is my stuff organized in bags? It's going to be a lot easier to load in and set up if you got it all squared away before you get there, rather than having loose cables and instruments all over the place. Will all this stuff fit in my vehicle? Ran up against this one myself recently in my little Chevy 4-door and had to play a little Tetris to make everything fit, so that's definitely something to think about in advance. So, once you get to the gig, you get all loaded in, then you're going to have to work on equipment setup. It's critical to know how to set your equipment up and also how long that's going to take. This is especially true if you're setting up your own PA and running your own sound. I'd recommend doing a dry run setting up your equipment at home, which is going to give you some practice with your equipment and show you how long that process will take. You don't need to be a pro sound man, but you do need to have a basic handle on how to hook up whatever you need to hook up and how to make it louder or quieter. P.S. It's also a good idea to know how to kill everything quickly in case you start getting feedback. There should be a master volume knob on a speaker or a mixer that you can use. Make sure you know where that is. Also, don't forget to roughly time the setup process. Remember, all the stuff in this section boils down to being on time, so getting a rough time estimate and then factoring that into how early you leave for the gig is critical. Alright, promo materials, everybody's favorite topic. Depending on your goals, you might have to cozy up to the fact that you're going to have to market yourself in one way or another as a musician. And if that is something you want to do, then it will most likely pay dividends to have a business card and or a QR code set up somewhere close by as you play your gig. This can be accomplished pretty easily these days at a fairly low cost. Now, I'd recommend you set up a site on a link.me or a similar networking site. I'll put a link in the description. These are basically sites that hold links to all your other social media or miscellaneous sites. Once you do that, head to Vistaprint or a similar site and either print off a small tabletop sign and or a bunch of business cards that include a QR code pointed to that link.me page. Now, people will be able to come up and grab a card or scan the code and be on their merry way. You can also use Vistaprint to get some cheap swag like stickers, etc. that people can take with them and stick somewhere. Also, you can get business card holders cheaply on Amazon as well to hold your swag upright so it looks real nice. Don't forget about the tips as well. You can hook up your Venmo to the link.me page so people can tip you easier. And we're obviously living in an increasingly cashless society, so this is a good idea. I'd also recommend bringing a small tip of some kind, tip jar of some kind, like a mason jar. Don't forget your Sprout dollars in there as well, so future dollars will be able to grow easier. Remember, gigs breed gigs, and as long as you're out in front of people doing the thing, it pays dividends to give them some way to find out more about you and what you're doing. Alright, next one. Practice. We're talking about practice. This is an obvious point, but you have to practice what you're going to play. It's a nerve-wracking thing to play live, and you should give yourself the best chance of success by practicing what you're going to play over and over and over. This is one of the main benefits of building out a set list, as we discussed earlier, so you know exactly what you need to practice before the gig. A couple notes on practice. There's infinite ways to go about this, but for me, ultimately you want to get to the point where playing your set is kind of boring to you. I don't mean you're burnt out on playing the tunes, but there shouldn't be any mysteries on how to play things, and you shouldn't have the feeling of like, oh man, I hope we make it through this one, on any of them. Optimally, you want to have those puppies down cold. Obviously, that doesn't always happen, but it's something to shoot for. Shameless self-plug, I did do a video on how to practice efficiently, and I'll put a link to it right up here. Maximizing your practice sessions in the days leading up to the gig is definitely a good thing to do. Also, another thing is to run your set or sets as a unit. Endurance is a big factor in playing live, and if you're just used to playing 1 or 2 songs and then turning on the Xbox, you might not have the gas or the focus to make it through the whole hour. It's even more important if you're playing a 2 or 3 hour gig. By the time that third hour rolls around, you get pretty groggy, especially if you're playing solo, it's getting late, and you're used to your strict 9:45 bedtime during the week like I am. Alright, so last main tip, self-presentation. Remember that from the minute you roll in to the minute you leave, you're probably being viewed and judged as a musician, like it or not, and that extends far beyond your musical skills. How you behave when you're on stage, how you talk to the employees and the customers before and after the gig, and how organized you are during setup and breakdown, these things all factor into this. Dress is another thing. I'd recommend figuring out what you're going to wear to the gig before the day of too, even if you're not a fancy dresser. That'll be one less thing you have to worry about. If you drink or imbibe otherwise, watch your levels on that one before and during the gig. That's going to make it much harder to remember and execute your tunes, and it's never a good look to be drunkenly rambling into a microphone in public. Alright, let's wrap this video up with a couple miscellaneous tips. Cables. Microphone and instrument cables get twisted up very easily. Nothing's going to slow you down more and make it look like you don't know what you're doing than twisted cables during setup at a gig. You can buy little Velcro loops off of Amazon to solve this. I'll put a link in the description. They're definitely a worthy investment, not just for gigs, but for musician life in general. Also, backups. If you can think of a thing that might break during a gig and it's feasible for you to bring a backup, you should do it. Guitar strings are notorious for breaking during gigs, as we talked about earlier. You should be proactive about this. You can either bring another set of strings or optimally a whole other guitar. Instrument and mic cables also sometimes have shorts in them that reveal themselves as you move them around during setup or breakdown, so it's a good idea to have spares of those as well. And for the love of Eddie Van Halen, please bring more than one guitar pick. Other than that, just relax and have fun. You worked hard to get to the point to be able to play music in front of people, so show up, be confident, and let them know what you can do. And that's it for this video on gigging. Let me know what you think. If you have any other tips or tricks on gigging, post them in the comments. Other than that, thanks for checking it out. As always, I'm Chris from doWhileLoops. Take it easy and enjoy making music.